The silent rancher's gift. The morning sun filtered through the dusty windows of Millfield's general store, casting long golden rays across the worn wooden floors. Sarah Beth stood quietly beside the counter, her hands folded in front of her simple, brown dress, watching as the townspeople gathered for what everyone whispered was a shameful affair. Her husband, Thomas Whitman, had made his intentions clear 3 days prior. Standing in their small cabin's doorway, he had delivered his cruel verdict with the coldness of a winter wind. 5 years married, and still no children, he had said, not even looking at her as he spoke. I need sons to work the land, Sarah Beth. If you can't give me that, then you're no use to me anymore. The memory still stung like a fresh wound. Now, as she stood in the store surrounded by curious faces, Sarah Beth felt the weight of every whispered conversation, every pitying glance. Thomas had announced to anyone who would listen that he was trading her away for a sack of corn seed, and whatever else he could get, as if she were nothing more than livestock. The general store felt smaller than usual with so many people crowded inside. Children peered around their mothers' skirts, not understanding what was happening but sensing the gravity of the moment. The older women shook their heads and whispered behind their hands, while the men shifted uncomfortably, some looking ashamed of the spectacle. Sarah Beth had always been well liked in Millfield. She helped at the church socials, brought soup to families when someone fell ill, and never spoke an unkind word about anyone. The fact that she had been unable to bear children was a source of private pain that she had carried silently for years. Now that pain was on display for the entire town to witness. Mrs. Henderson, who ran the boarding house, kept shooting disapproving looks at Thomas. She had tried to talk sense into him privately, but the man was stubborn and bitter. His father had left him the small farm with the understanding that it would be passed down through generations. Without sons, Thomas felt like a failure, and in his twisted logic, that failure was Sarah Beth's fault. The store's bell chimed softly as the door opened, and everyone turned to look. A tall figure stepped inside, his presence immediately commanding attention even though he moved with quiet purpose. Jake Morrison, the silent rancher who lived on the spread just outside of town, removed his wide-brimmed hat and held it respectfully in his hands. Jake was known throughout the county, but not for the usual reasons men gained reputations. He never started fights, rarely spoke unless spoken to, and kept to himself on his large ranch. What made him notable was his kindness, a quiet, steady kindness that showed itself in actions rather than words. When the widow Patterson's roof leaked during the spring rains, Jake appeared one morning with lumber and tools, fixing it without being asked. When young Billy Crawford got lost in the woods, it was Jake who found him and carried him home safely. Standing well over 6 feet, tall with dark hair that curled slightly at his collar, Jake had the kind of presence that made people feel safer just by being near him. His clothes were simple but well made, and his boots showed the honest wear of a man who worked his land with his own hands. Thomas straightened when he saw Jake, recognizing an opportunity. Well now, Jake Morrison, he called out with false cheerfulness, come to see what's for trade today. Jake's dark eyes moved slowly around the room, taking in the scene with careful observation. His gaze lingered on Sarah Beth for a moment, and she felt something she hadn't experienced in years, someone truly seeing her. Not as a failure or a burden, but as a person deserving of respect. Heard there was some corn seed available, Jake said simply, his voice low and steady. Thomas rubbed his hands together eagerly. Indeed there is. Prime seed corn, perfect for planting, and I'm offering a fair deal, too. He gestured toward Sarah Beth as if she were merchandise on display. A good woman who can cook and clean, plus 3 sacks of the finest corn seed you'll find in the territory. The silence that followed was heavy and uncomfortable. Several people looked away, unable to watch what felt like a betrayal of everything decent and right. Sarah Beth kept her eyes fixed on a knot in the wooden floor, wishing she could disappear entirely. Jake set his hat on the counter with deliberate care. Just the corn seed, he said quietly. Thomas frowned, confused. But Jake, think about what you're passing up here. Sarah Beth's a good worker, keeps a clean house. Just the corn seed, Jake repeated, his tone leaving no room for argument. The rancher reached into his jacket and pulled out a leather pouch, counting out silver coins. With precise movements, the sound of the money hitting the wooden counter seemed unnaturally loud in the quiet store. Thomas stared at the coins for a long moment, clearly disappointed but unable to argue with the fair price Jake was offering. Well, he said finally, I suppose that'll do for the seed corn. Jake nodded and began loading the heavy sacks onto his broad shoulders as if they weighed nothing at all. Sarah Beth watched him work, noting the easy strength in his movements and the way he treated even this simple task with care and attention. As Jake prepared to leave, he paused near where Sarah Beth stood. For just a moment their eyes met, and she saw something in his expression that made her breath catch. It wasn't pity or sympathy, it was recognition. As if he saw the person she truly was beneath the circumstances that had brought her to this moment. "Mrs. Whitman," he said softly, touching the brim of his hat in a gesture of respect that no one else had shown her that day. Then he was gone, leaving behind only the faint scent of leather and the outdoors. The general store felt different after his departure, as if his quiet presence had changed something fundamental about the room. Thomas counted his money again, muttering about lost opportunities, while the other townspeople began to disperse. The shameful spectacle was over. But Sarah Beth remained exactly where she had started, trapped in a marriage with a man who saw her only as a disappointment. That evening, as Sarah Beth prepared a simple supper in the cabin she had called home, for 5 years she found herself thinking about Jake Morrison's eyes. There had been something there, something that spoke of understanding and compassion. It was a stark contrast to the coldness she had grown accustomed to from Thomas. The next morning brought an unexpected knock at the cabin door. Sarah Beth opened it to find Jake Morrison standing on her small porch, hat in hand once again. Behind him she could see his wagon loaded with supplies. "Mrs. Whitman," he said in his quiet way, "I was wondering if you might consider helping me with something." Thomas appeared at her shoulder, curious about the unexpected visitor. "Morning, Jake. What brings you by?" Jake's attention remained focused on Sarah Beth. "I've got a large house out at the ranch," he said carefully. "Been living alone there for some time now. Could use someone to help manage things, cooking, keeping house, that sort of work. It would be a paying position, of course." Sarah Beth felt her heart begin to race. I don't understand." "It would be proper," Jake continued, his voice gentle but firm. "You'd have your own room, complete privacy. Mrs. Patterson from the boarding house has agreed to come by regularly to ensure everything stays respectable. I'm offering honest work for honest pay, nothing more." Thomas stepped forward, immediately suspicious. "Now wait just a minute here, Jake. Sarah Beth is my wife. She has obligations. Jake turned those steady dark eyes on Thomas, and something in his expression made the smaller man step back. "From what I witnessed yesterday, it seems like you were ready to trade away those obligations for cornseed," Jake said quietly. "This is simply a business arrangement. Mrs. Whitman would be free to accept or decline as she sees fit." The offer hung in the air between them like morning mist. Sarah Beth felt something stirring inside her that she hadn't felt in years. The possibility of leaving this cabin, of escaping Thomas's constant disappointment and cruelty, seemed too good to be true. "I would need to think about it," she said carefully, not wanting to appear too eager. Jake nodded respectfully. "Of course. Take all the time you need." He reached into his jacket and pulled out a small cloth bag. "In the meantime, I brought something for you." Sarah Beth accepted the bag with trembling fingers. Inside, she found a handful of small golden kernels, seed, but not the common variety Thomas had been selling. These were heirloom seeds, the kind that produced the sweetest, most tender corn. "For a kitchen garden," Jake explained simply. "Every good house needs fresh corn in the summer." The gesture was so thoughtful, so completely unexpected, that Sarah Beth felt tears prick at the corners of her eyes. No one had given her a gift in longer than she could remember. Certainly nothing chosen with such care and consideration. That night, after Thomas had fallen asleep, Sarah Beth sat by the window, holding the precious seeds and thinking about Jake Morrison's offer. It represented more than just employment. It was freedom, dignity, and the chance to start over. 3 days later, she made her decision. The morning she left the cabin, Sarah Beth carried only a small bundle of her few possessions. Thomas had signed the papers Jake's lawyer had drawn up, officially ending their marriage and releasing her from any obligations to him. The small payment Jake had offered Thomas for this inconvenience had sealed the deal. As Jake helped her into his wagon, Sarah Beth felt lighter than she had in years. The morning sun painted the landscape in shades of gold and amber, and for the first time in a long time, the future seemed bright with possibility. Jake's ranch was more beautiful than she had imagined. The house was large and well built, with a wraparound porch and windows that let in plenty of natural light. There were flower gardens that had been neglected but showed signs of past care, and a kitchen garden plot that would be perfect for her precious corn seeds. "The house belonged to my aunt," Jake explained as he showed her around. "She raised me after my parents died. Always said it needed a woman's touch to make it truly feel like home. Sarah Beth ran her fingers along the smooth wooden counters. In the spacious kitchen, imagining the meals she could prepare here, the sense of purpose she might find in caring for this beautiful place. Why, she asked suddenly, turning to face him. Why did you do this? Why help me? Jake was quiet for a long moment, looking out the window toward the distant mountains. When he finally spoke, his voice was soft but clear. I know what it's like to feel like you're not enough, he said simply. My aunt couldn't have children either. People in town whispered about it, called her strange for living alone, said she was wasting her life. But she was the kindest, most complete person I ever knew. She taught me that worth isn't measured by what others expect of you, but by the goodness you carry in your heart. Sarah Beth felt fresh tears, but these were different from the ones she had shed in her cabin. These tears came from a place of healing, of recognition, of finally being seen for who she truly was. As the days turned into weeks, Sarah Beth found her rhythm in the big house. She planted her corn seeds in the kitchen garden, tended the flower beds back to life, and filled the rooms with the warmth of home-cooked meals and careful attention. Jake proved to be a considerate employer and, gradually, a trusted friend. He never pressured her to be anything other than herself, never made her feel like she owed him more than honest work for honest pay. In the evenings, they would sometimes sit on the porch and watch the sunset, sharing comfortable silence and easy conversation. One evening, as they watched the cornstalks growing tall and strong in the garden, Jake spoke quietly. You know, I never bought you for corn, Sarah Beth, he said, using her first name for the first time since she had arrived. I bought the corn, and I offered you your freedom. There's a difference. Sarah Beth smiled, understanding the distinction completely. In that small act of kindness, Jake had given her something more valuable than corn or money or even shelter. He had given her back her dignity, her sense of worth, and her belief that she deserved to be treated with respect. The corn grew tall and sweet that summer, just as Jake had promised, and Sarah Beth grew too, flourishing in the warmth of kindness and the freedom to be herself. She had been traded away like property, but she had been rescued by compassion and given the chance to write a new chapter of her story. In the quiet ranch house, surrounded by golden corn and endless possibilities, Sarah Beth finally felt like she had found her way home.